Darius Cole had never been in a courtroom before. Not like this. Not as the accused. He was a 33-year-old single father from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Every day, he woke up before dawn, made breakfast for his 7-year-old daughter Maya, and caught 2 buses to get to his job at a local auto repair shop. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. Just a man trying to do right in a world that never seemed to give him a break. But that all changed one rainy Thursday evening. Darius had just picked up Maya from her after-school program. They stopped at a convenience store to grab a snack, his treat after a long week. But when they walked out, sirens blared. Within seconds, Darius was surrounded by 2 police cruisers. Step away from the child. Hands where we can see them. Guns drawn. Yelling. Confusion. He had no idea what was going on. Maya screamed. He tried to shield her. And then, he was slammed onto the wet pavement. Handcuffed. Dragged away. The accusation? Armed robbery. Of that very store. He didn't understand. He didn't even carry a weapon. He was wearing a work shirt with his name embroidered on it. How could this be real? The store clerk said the suspect wore dark jeans and a hoodie. Darius wore khaki pants. No hoodie in sight. And Maya? She kept screaming, "My daddy didn't do anything." But no one listened, because Darius was already guilty. In their eyes, he looked like he fit the story they wanted to tell. It took 3 nights before Darius Cole was granted bail. 3 nights away from Maya, who cried herself to sleep. 3 nights in a cold holding cell, treated like a criminal, fed with silence and side eyes, with no one asking what really happened. And then came the court date. The courtroom was packed, not because people knew Darius, but because the case, a so-called armed robbery involving a black man and a child, was juicy enough for the local news to show up. Darius stood in an ill-fitting suit borrowed from his pastor, wrinkled, one sleeve shorter than the other, his hands trembling, heart racing, not because he was guilty, but because he wasn't sure if truth mattered anymore. At the front of the courtroom sat Judge Peter Langford, a man known for his dry wit, icy demeanor, and a reputation for keeping the courtroom in order. He looked down at Darius through half-moon glasses. "So, Mr. Cole," the judge said, barely hiding a smirk, "you expect me to believe that a man matching your description with your record was just grabbing snacks for his daughter?" The courtroom chuckled. Darius froze. "My record?" he asked, confused. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Your Honor, Mr. Cole had a misdemeanor trespassing charge from 12 years ago. Dropped, but it still exists." Langford scoffed. "Well, people don't change that much, do they?" Laughter again. Like it was a comedy show. Like Darius's life, his daughter's fear, was just entertainment. Darius turned to see Maya, sitting in the back with his sister, eyes wide, her tiny hand clutching her teddy bear. She looked scared, but worse than that, she looked ashamed. That moment broke something inside him. Not the accusation, not the arrest, but the realization that his daughter might grow up thinking justice was a joke. Just when it felt like the world had turned its back, when Darius was ready to accept the unthinkable, a miracle walked into the courtroom. Her name was Rachel Jennings, a white woman in her 50s, petite, with short silver hair and a trembling voice. She was the manager of the convenience store where it all began. She had seen the story on the news and recognized the man in the footage. "He didn't rob us," she told the defense attorney. "That man, he paid for everything in cash. I remember because he smiled at his daughter when she asked for the rainbow lollipop. Most folks are in and out, but he took time with her." The courtroom shifted. Even the prosecutor looked up from his notes. Jennings continued, "The real robber came in minutes after Mr. Cole left. He wore similar clothes, sure, but I checked the timestamp myself. It's not the same man." A murmur rippled across the room. The judge's smirk vanished. The courtroom that had laughed at Darius was suddenly silent. The defense attorney asked Jennings, "Did you give this information to the police?" She nodded. "Twice. I left voicemails and even filed a report. I never got a call back." The judge blinked, visibly rattled. Then, from the gallery, someone gasped. Maya, still clutching her teddy bear, whispered to her aunt, Does this mean my daddy's not going away? By the time court adjourned, the story had already hit social media. Clips of Rachel Jennings' testimony, tears in her eyes, voice shaking, were shared thousands of times in hours. The headlines read, "Wrong man almost jailed. Ignored evidence comes to light. Father nearly loses daughter over a broken system." And just like that, the quiet suffering of Darius Cole exploded into a public storm. Outside the courthouse, a crowd gathered, mothers holding signs that read, "Blackheart, I am Darius Cole." Blackheart, being black isn't probable cause. Blackheart, a lollipop almost cost him his life. There were students, church leaders, community activists, black, white, Latino, standing shoulder to shoulder. Someone passed Maya a megaphone. She looked scared at first, but her aunt helped her lift it. "My daddy is not a bad man," Maya said softly. "He buys me lollipops. He makes pancakes. He sings off-key." The crowd went silent. Then they roared. Tears streamed down strangers' faces. People hugged. Even the toughest activists couldn't hold back. Then came the media. Local stations first, then national. The court had no choice. The judge called for an emergency review. The next morning, the courtroom felt different. Not colder, but heavier. Like truth itself was sitting in the front row. Judge Ronald Haskins entered, not with his usual smirk, but with eyes shadowed by something deeper than fatigue. Regret. The press was outside. Protesters lined the steps. Inside, the court clerk cleared her throat and said what no one expected. "The honorable judge has a statement before today's proceedings." Haskins stood. He looked at Darius, then at Maya, then at the empty seat where Rachel Jennings should have been. His voice cracked slightly. "In my 30 years behind this bench, I have prided myself on impartiality, on following the law. But what I saw yesterday was me, failing." He paused. This court almost sent an innocent man to prison, not because of what he did, but because of what we assumed he could do, because of the color of his skin. Yes, silence, tears. Even the bailiff blinked hard. Judge Haskins went further. The officer who identified Mr. Cole had no solid evidence, no clear footage, no weapon, just a feeling. This court allowed that to proceed. I allowed it. And then, in a moment rarely seen in any American courtroom, the judge did what pride often prevents. He stepped down from the bench, walked over to Darius, and said, "I'm sorry." The courtroom stood still. Not even the press dared to move. That apology didn't erase the trauma. It didn't undo the sleepless nights, the fear Maya had felt, or the scars that Darius would carry. But it meant something. It meant that even in a broken system, humanity can surface. That even from a bench stained by centuries of injustice, a seed of accountability could bloom. Darius Cole walked out of that courthouse a free man. But more than that, he walked out seen. Not as a suspect, not as a statistic, but as a father, a husband, a human being who had been wronged and finally vindicated. Maya gripped his hand tightly as the cameras flashed. But they didn't smile, because this wasn't a victory parade. It was a public reckoning. That courtroom didn't just release Darius. It exposed something deeper, the quiet, daily erosion of dignity so many face just for existing. It reminded everyone watching that injustice doesn't always wear a hood. Sometimes it wears a robe. Sometimes it hides behind paperwork. Sometimes it just laughs. But that day it was silenced. This isn't just a story about one man falsely accused. It's about a system that still leans too heavily on assumptions. It's about the power of voice, Maya's voice, of community, of truth. Because the truth is, silence protects no one. But when we speak up, when we stand together, we become more than victims. We become the verdict. If this story moved you, share it. Let others see that justice is possible, but never automatic. And if you've ever felt unheard, unseen, or dismissed, know this. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And on this channel, we will tell it. Subscribe to Faces of Suffering, because behind every silent tear, there's a truth the world needs to hear.